Hello there, Internet. This is Ondo's Art Tips, and I am, of course, Ondo. Before we kick everything off, I have a quick announcement. I recently started a Ko-fi account and am currently having a promotion where any donations of 2 or more coffees to me will get you a free 5x7-inch art print of your choice from a list of over 40 options. Oh! I'd really appreciate the support, but even if you can't donate, please check out my social media where I post all of my personal art and updates on things nobody gives a crap about, like whether or not my sandwich was any good. Anyways, on to the show. Well, it has been a while since I made my by far most popular video, which was all about what to avoid when creating an original character. So how about we flip that concept on its head? This is my top 5 things that can save an OC, in no particular order. Let's go! Number 1. Shape language. When designing a character, one thing that tends to get overlooked by the general audience is their structure. What parts make up the whole, so to speak? To the untrained eye, a viewer might look at a character without context and come up with an opinion about what the character is like. But if you press them farther and asked why they thought that, they might say things like, they look nice, or tired, or angry, but not really quite lay their finger on it. However, there's a lot to unpack in character design, especially if it's done well. One of the best ways to get the audience to associate certain characteristics to a character is to use shape language in the process of structuring them. But what exactly is shape language? Well, to grossly simplify it, it really boils down to 3 basic shapes: circles, squares, and triangles. It's normally rare to find a character that is made up of only one of these shapes, but using a majority of one type in a character design can help get certain reactions from the audience. If you used mostly circles, for example, they can give off a soft and unthreatening vibe. Characters that utilize circles are often cute, friendly, or young. Protagonists often exhibit round shapes because the audience is drawn to this shape, and in return will be drawn to the character. Squares are sturdy. They give off strong, large, and immovable vibes, and often muscular and heavy characters will show square traits. That also gives the impression of a stable, level-headed, and reliable character as well. Finally, we have triangles. These are sharp and uninviting. They may give threatening, active, or untouchable vibes from a character. They are often used in antagonists, rivals, and cunning characters. Use shape language to your advantage when designing a character, and you can help give the audience visual cues to help lead them to a good first impression on what the character is like. However, there are also plenty of ways you can use shape language to subvert the audience's expectations for some really fun effects. Speaking of which, Number 2. Subverting expectations. Characters that subvert expectation can be really compelling, and depending on how their subversion is built up, they can create a strong impression when the audience has the proverbial rug pulled out from under them. Eduardo's appearance is not at all reflective of his friendly and childlike personality. He has large, pointy teeth and horns, yet he is also easily scared and a bit of a crybaby. That subversion of expectation makes him a really unique and interesting character. Another example is Salim Bradley from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. His character is built up and portrayed as a small, excitable child. However, when it is revealed that he himself is actually one of the show's villains, it is a genuinely shocking moment for the audience. The subversion of expectations for Salim is not only an aspect of his character, but is also a huge reveal, one that impacts the story greatly. This is definitely something to keep in mind when developing your story, and also a great way to create a memorable twist for your narrative, or create interesting characters that do not fit into a normal archetype the audience has come to expect. You can also point out how a character or characters do not fall into what is expected of their demographic, but still have a character design that reflects their personalities. Things like a cutesy villain, kind monsters, or dogs that can read can all be visually represented, but still subvert certain expectations that the audience may be used to. Sometimes all it takes to push a normal character into a truly memorable one is to add that unexpected twist. Number 3. Strong silhouettes. I brought this point up in my posing video, but it's also a really helpful point to keep in mind for character design as well. If you're looking to give your character a memorable look, one thing that can help is using silhouettes. In your cast of characters, it should be easy to differentiate each of them in a lineup quickly. If you have too many characters that look the same or similar, it will result in similar silhouettes as well. This will make picking them out of a crowd harder, or may end up hindering the audience from remembering who is who or confusing characters for each other from scene to scene or panel to panel. Having distinct and interesting silhouettes really help the audience pick out a character in a crowd and tell at a glance who is doing what. Ways you can change up the silhouettes from character to character is to mess with height, weight, body structure, posture, clothing, accessories, and hairstyles, to name a few. Even if you're going for a more realistic style of anatomy, there's plenty of ways to change up a silhouette and make a character stand out. Number 4. Keeping the story, and their story, in mind. So what's your story about? Is it a high fantasy adventure? A comedic steampunk western? Is it slice of life, all about little moments and big emotions? Then let the audience know all about it just from your design work alone. Your characters should reflect the story and enhance the viewer's understanding about what kind of experience they're in for. If you have a lot of harsh edges and drastic shadows on your characters, chances are it's not going to be a lighthearted rom-com, but rather something like a horror or psychological drama instead. I mean, you could definitely try to make it work. The Wallflower does just that, and uses the contrasting style for really great comedic effect. So keep that in mind when deciding how you want your story to look and feel. Is the story about something that you can apply some aspect of to the style, like the ocean or graffiti? Another aspect of story to keep in mind is what your character's personal story is. These are all the private notes on your character that I talked about in the first video, your Wisconsin French fries stories, if you will. But rather than writing them out in a bio, you're going to apply them straight to the character. What makes them who they are? What were they doing before the main story? What will they be doing during it? And where will we leave them at the end? Know them inside and out, take all that you learn and apply it to their design. Maybe they have a scar from some incident before the story that helps show off a part of their past trauma or dangerous lifestyle. Or maybe they get it during the story by being injured for someone else's sake. Is it in line with their character, or is it something that came about because of some important change within them? What's their background? Were they royalty and now they're on the streets? Would they still have some memento from their past or still retain their regal demeanor? You should also consider their story arcs as well. Do they start out as a brat and become more mature and reliable? Do they start out cocky and lose their nerve? How would any of these changes affect the character's design? Does the change shift their style of clothing? Do they lose a limb? Does time pass and they grow up? Finally, how do they dress? Are they a member of a specific culture or practice a specific religion that they would showcase in their dress or mannerisms? Are they modest, or do they like showing some skin? Do they dress their age? Do they have a uniform, and how do they change it up from everyone else's? How does the world they live in affect how the people dress? Is weather a factor? Are they tied to a specific time period? Understanding costuming is very important in character design and visual storytelling, so important that it's getting its own video. For now, just consider it an honorary number 6. And number 5, interaction. So you have a character. Unless they live in an absolute void or get castaway status stranded, they will need to interact with other characters throughout the story at some point. These interactions can really make or break a character and even influence the audience's reaction to the story as a whole. There are some characters that are iconic together, some that are best when they share the screen, and some that just don't work without the other. Some character interactions are the driving force of the story, and some create unforgettable moments that stick with the audience. Character interaction is integral to the story. Understanding how a character can change and grow throughout interaction can not only improve the writing of the story, but also make your characters much more compelling and interesting overall. So really think about what makes a character interaction important and interesting to the progression of the story, as well as what will help mold them into who they will be at the end of the story. Take Finding Nemo, for example. Throughout the movie, Marlin meets many characters and undergoes a lot of changes. In the beginning of the film, it's clear that he is an overly protective father. He is overbearing and constantly worrying. His interactions with Nemo and the other parents on the reef show this. It is only after being separated from his son that Marlin is forced to interact with many other fish and animals, ones that end up changing his disposition over time. He meets the forgetful but lovable Dory, he faces a support group of sharks, a laid-back sea turtle, and a helpful pelican, to just name a few. Throughout his journey, he learns patience, how to trust the judgment of others, how to go with the flow, and ultimately how to understand how to let go of his old ways. Marlin is changed due to these interactions, and by the end of the movie, although he ends up in the same place, he has clearly evolved past who he was at the beginning. In part, this was due to being pushed into extraordinary circumstances, but it was mostly due to who he met, what he learned from them, and how they interacted with him. Keep in mind that not all characters will interact in the same way either. Relationships and power dynamics will often influence the way characters react to each other, and it is your job to effectively show this off to your audience as naturally as you can. It isn't enough for you to have the characters state that they are best friends, but to show them acting that way as naturally as you can through their screen time together. Also note that a character interaction doesn't need to include any dialogue at all. Simple visual cues and framing can really drive the point home, and in many situations, they can even be more effective than speaking. Even something as simple as moving the angle of a composition can add more context to an interaction. Changing the camera shot or tilting the angle can help portray the mood of whatever interaction is taking place, or even manipulating lighting and reflections. These are all tools to help you deliver the most impact when showing off an interaction between characters. It's all just a matter of discovering how to use them effectively. And finally, I'll leave you all off with some supplementary materials. First, I have Designing the Secret of Kells. This book is absolutely breathtaking, and if you really want an in-depth look into fantastic examples of shape language and designing the visuals around the story's overall concept, this is the book for you. The designers at Cartoon Saloon really run with the visual style of illuminated manuscripts and medieval tapestries, but adapt them into a really appealing animation style. I would really recommend watching the movie if you haven't already as well. It is an absolute visual treat. Next, I have an exercise you can use to find interesting ways to subvert expectation for your characters if you have a hard time thinking outside the box and want to shake up your OC designs more. Simply fill out a list of at least 10 traits that would be obvious choices for the character's archetype. Next, across from those traits, fill in the exact opposite trait. Now try swapping out some of your original traits with the opposites. You can actively choose them or pick at random for more of a challenge. In the end, you'll have some unexpected twists to the character and create an interesting foundation to work off of when developing your character and their story. Lastly, I recommend the book Framed Ink. If you want a bit more information on how to portray interactions through visual cues, this book is such a great source for creating compelling and interesting compositions that really help tell strong stories. I also recommend checking it out if you have any interest in creating storyboards and comics. You'll learn all about how to frame a scene the most effectively, making your shots clear and easy to understand, and how to really manipulate your compositions to help get your point across to the audience. And that's all for today's episode, everyone. I hope this video helped you think about new ways to improve your OCs, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!